Welcome to the Kingdom View. I am your host, Lou Ann Toposky. Thanks for joining us. Come on, let's see what God has for us today. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Kingdom View. I'm so glad you've come back. Honestly, we have an amazing show for you today. It's on toxic relationships. We're going to talk about this from three experts, and we've all gone through some toxic relationships, whether it's, with a spouse or a partner or even in business. So toxic relationships happen all the time, even in ministry. So we want to talk about this. Today we have three panelists who are absolutely amazing. We have Lieutenant Colonel Mark Weiser with us. He is U.S. Air Force retired. He is a career combat F-15E fighter pilot whom we've all come to know as Bud. We love Bud. He is now a consultant, mentor, and speaker, helping struggling professionals and organizations develop solutions to overcome adversity. We also have Doris Rue with us. She brings decades of experience as an RN, ministry leader, pharmaceutical specialist with years in psychiatric focus. Doris is the Victory for Purpose coach with a big heart for empowering women. She invites you to her Facebook group, Wear the Crown, Fulfill the Call. Amen. We also have the lovely Kelly Williams-Hale with us today. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and mentor. As a confidence and clarity coach, she teaches Christian women how to release the shame and guilt of their past choices and embrace the gift of God's grace. All right, so let's get started. Bud, can you share with our audience about toxic relationships? I know that we've all been through them. Can you share a little bit about your experience or what you would like to let our audience know?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. Yep. It's a heavy topic.
It is.
It's a great one right off the bat, isn't it? What I would offer is when things don't make sense. We have five senses, and as a pilot, I kind of relate things to the way I used to fly, and really for aviation, we're flying jets. That's pretty fun. But we do have five senses. When senses don't add up when we're flying, it usually leads to bad things. Specifically when the eyes don't match what the ears are telling you. In the ear, we have some tubes back there, and there's some fluid that spins. We have some senses back there that actually feels the G's, whether you're accelerating one way or another. Sometimes they don't really add up. So, if people have been on boats and not felt well, it's probably the reason that happens. So when your senses don't add up and you're in a relationship, that's kind of my clue to go, hey, what's going on? I hear what someone's telling me, but I'm seeing a different action. And in times of confusion, that's maybe you could just go 1 + 1 is an equaling 3, or equaling 2, it's 3. Right. So. We call it visual illusions. We should call it spatial disorientation when these things happen. It usually happens at night or in the weather, but not necessarily, but mostly when your eyes lose the focus of the horizon and where you are in respect to what you think you're doing flying is actually a little different than the airplane knows it's flying. So when we recognize something, if I pop into a cloud, and it could be insidious or it could be quick, or I get from level flight to a place where my nose is below the horizon and it's going towards the big ball, which we call Earth, that leads to bad things. So how do you have to recognize that? And it could be that, hey, I hear some wind rush over my canopy, and it gives me a clue to go, hey, I gotta go, what am I really doing? And I'll come to the gauges. And we have things in the airplane that says, the airplane thinks it's going this way, and it's 99.999% always right. Where your brain and your butt and what you feel and the G's can lie to you. Right. So now we go to the gauges, and we have ways to recognize that and confirm and recover to level flight. People have the same cues when you're in relationships, and you do see differences from what you hear from your partner. Right. And over time, it could be insidious, a little bit at a time where you get away with some things. Or it could be severe, where it could be something like infidelity or stealing money from your partner. That's a pretty cut and dry. Ooh, right. You kind of see that and what to do with it. Sometimes you don't want to believe it. We call that heavy hand. when you don't believe your gauges. You're like, there's no way I'm pointing at the ground in the airplane because I feel different. But I know I'm supposed to do that, but something stops you from actually fixing the airplane and getting back to level flight. A lot of people do that in relationships. There's no way my husband or my wife or my boss is doing this to me. And you don't fix it, but it's right there.
Yeah.
So that's a good cue for what I do when I help my folks, my peeps, my clients. I just get to the facts, and someone outside can actually see that better for you, and kind of give you a little heads up, and hey, we actually have a problem here.
Yeah, that's good. I really like that analogy with the plane and the relationships. You don't want to believe what you're seeing because you're feeling something else. You can't believe that that's really going on. You can't believe that this person is like backstabbing you, stealing from you, doing these things behind your back and saying they're not. So, but you do have to acknowledge them and then really make a decision. What are you going to do?
And once it happens to you, it's so much easier to see it for someone else to help them through the process of getting out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that makes us the expert. I see what you're going through. I went through it. Trust me, this is what's happening. You need to look at it. Thank you very much for sharing. All right, next we have Doris Rude. Doris, can you share with our audience today what you want to share with them about toxic relationships?
Yes, first of all, Luann, I want to thank you for inviting me to be on this show with you and these awesome panelists. And Bud, thank you. I relate to what you just said, even though I never flew a fighter jet, but I honestly get the being upside down, and it just doesn't make sense. And it's confusing. It's bewildering. It really, really stumps you regularly, so I get that. Hey, listen, early on, in some relationships I've had, I used to see red flags, but I just truly believed the best of everyone. And it was hard for me to believe someone would do something like that when I wouldn't do it. So I believed the best of everyone. And I think we should always be looking with good intention that people are up to good and not up to bad. Wow, that did not serve me well. And I'll get back to that a little bit later. But I just want to say that I think that we probably all can't go through life without enduring at some point a toxic relationship, even if it is with a boss or a colleague at work in corporate America, or even someone in your family, or someone that was a friend, or you thought that they were worth making a friend out of, and then they turned out to be quite off kilter and backstabbing and not safe, and you couldn't trust them. So anyway, I didn't mean to go off there, but I just wanted to say that I have experienced some toxic relationships, and I'm not going to expose anyone. I'm not going to call any names or reveal any identity by saying what they did for a living or anything like that. But I do want to just let you know that I have been quiet for decades. So this is like my coming out party. I have never talked about this. I have almost been fearful to talk about it because I was so well trained to zip the lips and not tell anybody. And I am not codependent. But I think because I was a Pollyanna and was very forgiving and very hopeful and optimistic, and always believed that things would get better. That's just my nature. So I think that's why I've always been targeted by these people, but I'm thankfully not as naive as I once was. I'm a lot wiser, and I'm very in tune to the Holy Spirit, and I'm much more discerning than I ever was before. But listen, I want to share that my toxic relationship that I'm just thinking about right now at this minute, this person, I would learn this years later. They were diagnosed with a cluster of various mental illness diagnoses. But I would learn later more about narcissism and the different types, like covert and overt and grandiose and vulnerable and all this. And I can truly say that the person I'm mostly thinking about today is someone that really devastated my life. And but I want to be responsible when I use the word narcissist. I see on Facebook and social media, people just flippantly throw it around. It's so irresponsible to do that. And I'm not going to get into the DSM-5 or the DSM-10 or any DSM talk, but we have to be responsible when we call someone a horrible name like that. It's very insulting. And I am not about insulting people. I'm about building people up, speaking truth when it becomes important. But I don't think we should ever falsely accuse or mislabel anyone with such a cruel word. But I do want you to know that through my work in pharma and calling on psychiatry and mental health hospitals over so many years, I did on a few occasions hear this phrase: it's difficult to diagnose a jerk. And I don't like to call people bad names, and jerk's not a nice name. But in this case, when you're talking about a narcissist, whether they're overt or covert, they are jerks with what they do to you. Honestly, I have heard it said that they're like a one-person wrecking crew. They will devastate the other person, yet take no blame for it. There's no remorse because they never do anything wrong, at least not in their own estimation. They can destroy you. They can control you. They can have power over you, manipulate you every morning, noon, and night, love bomb you one day with one power trip, and then the next day, still on a power trip, lie about you or lie to you.
That's true.
Lie to you. So I share that because I've been through a lot, whether it was verbal and, emotional abuse, quite a few betrayals, public scandals, and the humiliation that came from those scandals. And even stole my social security number without me knowing it, and opened up all these credit cards and ran them up and maxed them out. And it took me several years. Well, it took me a while to find out about them because they had to track me down. And then it took me a few years to go back and pay off that $36,000. And I never put a penny on those credit cards. So I'm telling you, I would never do that to anyone. And I would not wish that on anyone. Right. But we need to be very aware that these kind of things are going on in the real world. And just know if it's happening to you out there in our viewing audience, you're not alone.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing, Doris. That is true. And I know other people who had their Social Security stolen and their identity stolen and lots of terrible things. So there are people out there. And so just like Bud has talked about, we have to pay attention. Even though we're the nice person, we can't believe that they've done this actually to us and they love bomb us and do all these things. We need to wake up. We need to wake up and come to the party and realize that we're worth saving. So thank you very much for sharing your story. Kelly, can you share with the audience your view on toxic relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the definition of toxic relationship being someone that behaves in a certain way that hurts you or that makes you uncomfortable. And I think for me, I had those red flags where I was in a relationship. I had all the red flags, but what they presented, the person they presented was a charming person. They were very outgoing. There was an attraction. And then it was that shift. It was that shift where I didn't recognize the way he was treating me because I had been, I grew up in an environment with my dad being an alcoholic. And that was kind of how we communicated. It was kind of like a fun, sarcastic, way of picking on you. But it was really verbal abuse, and it was really toxic, I should say, in terms of it didn't make me feel good, and it's becoming aware that the way somebody's treating you is really, it's right or it's wrong.
Yeah,
and
it's
particularly
like a backhanded compliment sometimes,
Yeah,
Sorry
and when you recognize that, it's an awareness. Like Doris, I tend to look for the positive.
Yeah.
And like Bud said, you don't want to believe that somebody is actually insidiously treating you this way on purpose. My girlfriends would notice, but I tended to be that person that would be forgiving. And it kind of reminds me about just communication and boundaries. And I went to counseling, and that's when the light bulb went off.
Right.
And I was reading stories about other people because I felt like my situation was very unique. And when I saw other people had these kinds of experiences, it just was that light bulb that allowed me to realize that I had a choice. where I grew up not really feeling like I had much of a choice, particularly in a relationship, and this was my second relationship, with same similarities.
Yeah.
So you tend to kind of repeat patterns and repeat choices, particularly in relationships, until you're aware
Right.
and understand that there is a better way. Like, you don't deserve this,
Right.
you know? And so I think very subconsciously, I felt like I deserved it. And again, it was like just the subconscious where you don't understand until you do.
Right.
And then you can't, it's like you can't unsee something.
Right.
And so I started setting boundaries that didn't go over well. They weren't welcomed. But the boundaries were meant to protect me. And so communicating, I did have to learn on how to communicate and be, you know, just what I wanted, because I would always put that other person first. And this was in other relationships, not just the marriage I was in, but even in friendships, that I tended to be like, go with the flow, you know, and you kind of lose yourself. And so in toxic relationships, you can really lose yourself. You get that spinning and not understanding, because what you're seeing is really not how they're acting. It's like just so confusing, like Doris said. And so my encouragement is just to be aware. If somebody's telling you that somebody's treating you badly, if you're forgiving or overlook a lot of things, just pay attention. Pay attention to how your senses are feeling, what you're witnessing in terms of their behavior, and really just your intuition is usually right on. And I believe that's God, you know. And for me, I know that I went through this so that I could help other people. I think we opened with that. Sometimes we go through situations and we don't understand, why am I in this? And it hurts when it breaks, when you break up. But then when you get healed, when you come to know that God has a plan for you and that you can now pull somebody else out, because this type of situation and this type of topic is very hidden, because a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they've been mistreated. And so I love that we're talking about it openly to provide hope and resources and opportunities for people.
Right. Thank you for sharing. You bring up a couple different things. So thank you for sharing your story, number one. But growing up in an alcoholic environment, it does cause us to see things a little differently. And for me, I was the same way. And so I found myself being more codependent, and I was the people pleaser, and I wanted to do those things too. But you're right, when you start setting those boundaries, it's because you're starting to realize, hey, you don't deserve this. I am worth more, and that's not okay. And similar to you, I had my girlfriends telling me, why are you with that person? You know, why? That doesn't make it doesn't make sense, right? So let's talk about this a little bit more. Because yes, there are a lot of toxic people out there, but like I think, Doris, you have said in the past anyway, that hurting people hurt people, and we all probably have said it at some point. And so those people are people, right? God loves them just the way he loves us. But sometimes those people have been hurt also. They haven't dealt with their hurt. And so sometimes, even though we want to be the savior and we want to help them, we also have to help ourselves. Enough is enough, and we have to take care of ourselves. We can pray for them and we can say whatever, but like you said, sometimes when we even put those boundaries up, they're going to be upset about those boundaries because they're so used to us taking care of them. But you know, once we take care of ourselves, they have to eventually look at themselves, and if they don't, they'll find someone else to use, which is sometimes what a narcissist does. They can't live without an empath, which is kind of what we are. You know, we're empathetic, and we almost go the other route because we want to keep it together. But at some point, we have to wake up and we have to make a decision to help ourselves. So let's talk about this a little bit more. What kind of things can we do to help this situation and perhaps others? What helped you? I mean, I think all of you have mentioned counseling at some point, but what's the tipping point? What's going on in your mind now? How can we either help the people out there, or just acknowledge something about the narcissist?
I guess I'm first.
You are. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just happened to look that direction.
I felt that. There's a lot of things you can do, and clearly we won't have the years it takes to go through every little thing. But you know, I used to be involved with big fights. You know, I was a military guy. I was involved with conflict, and it wasn't just flying the jets. It was planning the big operations. When I was the planner for big operations, take Iraq for example, Iraqi freedom, to come up with options for the boss to whatever problem set we had. We usually gave them 3 options, and we built those options, you know, big movements, by making some assumptions. When you get into a relationship, whether it be with a boss or a spouse or, you know, you name your conflict, the relationship is fundamentally based. You have to have some assumptions, and assuming it's a 50-50 relationship on a marriage, you enter that contract and you go, you know, you were taught how to be a good wife or husband. You're assuming they did too, and you're assuming you're right. I mean, just if you're the good guy, assuming, you hope for a good, even give-take relationship. However, the insidious movement of giving a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, before you know it, the scale's tipped a little bit more than you really realized, and before you know it, you might be in a position where your resources go away. So challenge those assumptions. Did you assume that I will give and he will give and everything's good, and is he given? You know, is he given here, or is she giving in this area? Is she giving as much as you are? Right. I think if you can make a list on pros and cons of what you give and what he gives or takes on both sides, and just compare them, you know, objectively, not subjectively, not like he hurt my feelings one day. Fundamentals, put them down and compare them. Go, you know, this could be a little highlight because my ears aren't matching my eyes, and you got to start putting things together. That might be a technique to help yourself move forward.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed as you were talking, you were saying, you know, you have to notice if he does this or if you do this. And I know because you have shared with me that you have actually helped a lot of women kind of look at those sorts of things. I mean, I know you do this in some of your counseling or coaching things because you've been through it. You help others identify whether it's a man or a woman. And I appreciate that about you, Bud. So thank you very much for that, because it doesn't matter who we're helping. It's a person in front of us who needs our help, and we can help them.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I mean, it doesn't matter your sex, your race, your gender, you know, right. All the things that are being thrown all over the airways right now. Throw that out the window. That stuff is nothing but chaff. If a person's hurting for a reason, they're hurting for a reason, and let's kind of dig into it. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not licensed, but I have been through conflict. Right. I got that one covered. Right. Yeah. And to see the items that we used military-wise, transition from the personal life, it's an easy bridge. Yeah.
Well, I have learned from some of the things that you have shared, and I appreciate that you're very similar in what I think too, is that it doesn't matter. It's a person in front of us. So thank you. So ladies, who else would like to share about this subject matter?
I think when you're dealing with someone that, you know, when you're dating and they're drawing you in and you're just so like, wow, they just are wonderful to me, and wow, this is amazing. And then you start seeing some things that are not matching up, like Bud was talking about, and you're getting confused about who they truly are. And then you start listening to their victim stories, and all these horrible things that they say happen to them, and you start getting stuck in that sticky web of feeling sorry for them, kinda. And you start realizing you're constantly having to prop them up because they're like a bottomless pit. I assume that's their fractured ego, their core insecurities from their childhood pain. I mean, I just don't know. And that's not for me to figure out. And I'm not interested in figuring that out. But my point is, it's the symptoms. It's the things that happen on the outside that are so crazy. So I remember trying to, in the early days, being like, I'm a steel magnolia. And I would just push back respectfully, but I would push back. That did not go well for me. And I'm not going to give you examples of that. And then after that, I started learning to appease, just to gently walk on the eggshells and tiptoe around all the crazy making, because it was crazy. And then toward the last years of the relationship, I became more emotionally distant, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, that was easier for me to just not tell him about my dreams or my joys or my victories that day, and not to talk about my concerns or my worries or my fears either. So I kept it more on the surface.
Right.
And he did not like that. It did not go well for me then either. And that was soon when he started moving forward and he found someone else that he could dismiss and discard me for. And you know what? He did me a favor. He did me a huge favor. And I praise God for that decision he made, because I'm the one that landed on my feet. I let him believe he got what he wanted, because I didn't care if he cared if I did or not. But I'm the one that really did great. So I say own and embrace your freedom for sure.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Own and embrace your freedom. And I like that he gave you an out. And we do look for that, didn't we? I mean, when I was in a toxic relationship, I looked for that out. So good job finding it.
Yeah.
Kelly, last
Well,
words.
same, because I this was my second marriage, this particular relationship I'm talking about, and so I didn't want to just get divorced because we didn't get along.
All right.
You know, and that's what started my counseling journey. I wanted to find and do what I could to save the marriage, but I was praying and I was starting to set those boundaries, and it did not go over well. And I believe when somebody like that has those tendencies, doesn't have someone to control anymore, they will go and find someone, because there is something inside them. I began owning my voice and knowing that I could control what I said in terms of communicating and my emotions. And I did find out that the man was unfaithful. It was crazy. Like, that's a whole nother story and what God showed me. But I believe that when we begin setting boundaries, it can be the beginning of the end, but it's also the beginning of freedom.
Right.
Because if they're not willing to change and grow, then God doesn't want us to be in a relationship that's abusive.
Right.
And so he will open doors, he will make a way. If you find yourself in that kind of a relationship, all of us have gone through the counseling route personally, but we've all come out of it on the other side, and offer options and solutions and ways to walk with someone through this journey, you know, to freedom.
Right. And, you know, I actually, a couple of you mentioned it. And what you've mentioned is when you set the boundaries, then they go somewhere else. So you find out if somebody is with you, if they respect your boundaries, and if they don't, and they go find someone else, then you know that you made the right choice and keep making them for yourself. I want to thank you for joining us today. This was an amazing panel. Thank you, everyone, for being with us, Bud, Doris, and Kelly. And I want to thank our audience for being with us. If you're in a toxic relationship or you know someone else who is, please take care of you, because you're worth it. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on The Kingdom View. Bless you. If this message has blessed or inspired you in any way and you would like to support The Kingdom View, go to thekingdomview.com and click on the donate button. All gifts are tax deductible.